material presented in this webinar and recording is for educational and informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal and financial advice. This information should not substitute for the advice of competent legal counsel or a financial advisor.
I guess what you're trying to do now is try to figure out how to help more investors instead of just going to work and working for one specific servicing company. You're trying to branch out now because notes have started to become such a popular way to make money, and you want to go out and support and help some of these investment funds. Is that correct?
That is correct. And one of the biggest pieces that a lot of investors and hedge funds don't think about, other than Kevin Cordell, is being compliant and following rules and regulations and the laws. And they don't realize that it can get them into trouble, and it can cost them a lot of money if they get a sophisticated borrower on the phone to somewhat entrap them in breaking the law unknowingly, or sometimes the investor just doesn't care. But those infractions can cost you a lot of money. For every FDCPA violation, which is the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act, every infraction that you break with a borrower, it's $1,000. And it can actually, be enforced. It's not something that, the borrower can just go away unless you make them go away. You will find borrowers who will send you a letter demanding for you to give them restitution for your wrongdoings on violating FDCPA.
Very important. Yeah, I agree.
You can go to conferences and you can hear, but deadbeats talk about how they've made money off of ignorant investors who did not know what they were doing on attempting to collect a debt that they actually owed. And the biggest piece of the puzzle is sometimes they get their debt forgiven because you have broken the law.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been to those conferences myself, and actually hearing from attorneys that have gotten up on stage and have gone through things that half the audience was cringing, just couldn't believe that they were out there contacting borrowers before they purchased the note and all the wrong things. It really is kind of a scary place, and of course we want to stay as compliant as we can and actually be in the borrower's best interest to be compliant and to help them out of a bad situation that they're in. And that's always been NoteConference's strong point, and we want to continue that. And that's one of the reasons why you're on the call tonight, Sabrina. I really appreciate that again. Now, as far as your being able to take a portfolio that someone has kind of already decided it was trashed, can you elaborate more on that? Like, give me maybe a specific case study where there was a borrower that went into bankruptcy, Chapter 7 bankruptcy on a first position note, or can you dig through your archives or something like that?
Well, I had an investor who had purchased some loans, and they were more concerned about getting the seconds performing, and they had pretty much written off all of their loans that were bankrupt, whether they were a 7 or a 13. It just wasn't something that they were interested in. And I said, well, why haven't you done anything with these loans that are in bankruptcy? Well, they're Chapter 7, and properties probably aren't worth anything, and I just don't want the hassle. And I said, well, why don't you let me look at those loans and see what I can do with those loans? Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do some creative thinking outside of the box and see what I can do with those loans. But I'm not recommending that you foreclose. And these were all loans that were in first position, probably $20,000, $30,000 properties, and he just didn't see the value in those loans. And so the first thing that I did was I utilized the door knocking service to do a door knock just to verify if the properties were vacant or occupied. Every single property were occupied, But I told them to do the door knock, but not to pursue anything in reference to the debt. Just wanted to verify occupancy on the property. So we
Okay, so
verified that
can
all.
you run me through that, Sabrina? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so
Okay.
the door knocker shows up. This is a hired service that you've been able to handle or hire a company to go out and knock on the door for you, even though this property may be 2,000 miles away from your office. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then the door knocker shows up at the door, and so how does that actually transpire? The conversation when the borrower opens the door and says, "Who are you?"
And the door knocking service said that they were actually just doing a property inspection for the financial institution that owned their note and mortgage, and they were just verifying that the property was occupied.
Perfect.
And they offered my phone number. Would you like the investor's phone number so they can reach out to you or you can reach out to them? But we don't really know. This isn't our loan. We're providing a service for the financial institution. And as a financial institution, you have a right to secure and protect your assets. So you're still not pursuing the debt at this point with someone that you know that is either in an active bankruptcy or a discharge bankruptcy.
Nice.
So I get my reports back, I get photos, and I'm looking at these photos, and even though the property values aren't high, I see pride in ownership. The grass is cut, flowers planted in the yard, curtains hanging up at the windows, all key indicators that whomever's in this home has made this home, and it's not a temporary place they want to be.
Right. It's home to a family.
It's home. So they have my phone number, but they haven't really reached out. So what else can I do? I look at the docket, and I see who the bankruptcy attorney is, and I reach out to the bankruptcy attorney. Do I have permission to contact your client? Do I got a yes? Do I got a no? So the two that I got the yes for, I also did some inquiring with the attorneys. Well, why didn't you have them sign a reaffirmation? Because I've done a property check, I've done an inspection, they're still there, they haven't gone anywhere. Why didn't you have them sign a reaffirmation? Well, the property is way upside down. They owe over $100,000 on a property that's maybe worth $40,000. I'm not going to advise my client to sign a reaffirmation on that, which makes sense.
Sure.
So I look at what they paid for the notes. One of the notes, they had paid $1,000 on the note. $1,000 on, because it was a multiple tape purchase. So they had put a value on everything they were purchasing. So I say to the investor, well, this is still a win because you paid $1,000 for it. I understand that you weren't going to do anything with it. So let's see if we can get them to sign a modification agreement.
Nice.
Well, why would you do that? Well, because now I'm getting them to make a commitment to a reduction on their debt, and I have a new contract in place, which now voids the old one.
Beautiful.
And
I just want to interject here for 1 second, Sabrina. I know that we're moving kind of quick through the terms, and we're moving really fast, diving down into some really hardcore stuff. If people are having questions, please write them into the questions box, and we'll try to cover them at the end of the conversation. And if not, you still have those questions that have not been answered, we will be set up to receive emails to continue the conversation. Because if you're worried about reaffirmation, all the nice terms that you're getting here, your questions will be answered. I just wanted to throw that in, Sabrina. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So the investor was like, well, it's not really worth my time. I said, okay, you have a $40,000 loan. You do a new AM. You don't have to do it for 30 years. Maybe let's do it for 15 years. Do it at a fair interest rate. You're still going to make money. If this borrower makes 4 payments, you at least made back what you paid for the loan, and it was worth your time. Or you turn it into a win-win where this borrower will make all of the payments and you recover $40,000, which is the value of the home, and this is revenue that you're generating that you really weren't even expecting to make. Or you can turn it into a performing loan for 12 months and then sell it to another investor who would like to house that loan in their portfolio.
Wow. That's powerful.
So that's what we did with one of the loans, is that we actually convinced the attorney to get their client to agree to a modification. We did it over a 15-year period at a 6% interest rate, and we even got them to put a $2,000 payment down. So they actually paid for the loan with the down payment.
Wow. So I guess you could attribute this whole thing to basically your investors' lack of education as far as bankruptcy to even think that there was any value on this note at all.
Correct.
Wow, that's great.
And just to give you guys some numbers in reference to this particular loan, he paid $1,000 for the loan. We ammed it over 15 years at 6% at a $40,000 UPB, and we did a principal reduction in order to get to that. If they were to pay the whole entire 15 years, their monthly payment would have been $337.54, and total payments collected would have been $60,750.02. That's paying for at least a kid's college education if they go to an economical school, if you want to look at it that way.
Nice.
And it's a lot higher return than you would get with your money sitting in an IRA collecting dust.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and that all just goes to they were just about to throw that loan into the garbage.
And, and some investors think, well, someone will die or they'll sell the property and that's when I'll get my money back. But there are things that you actually have to think about. Are you actively checking taxes to see if this loan's on a tax sale? Do you have a responsible buyer that's going to pay their taxes or going to pay their homeowner's insurance, that you won't lose it to tax sale or you won't lose it to a fire, and then all you have is level ground that secures your loan? You have to think about those things too, about putting a loan on a shelf, as a lot of investors will say when it's a loan that they really don't want to be bothered with, or it's a loan that they don't really feel like it's an asset at the time of purchase. Make sure you do your upfront due diligence on that loan if it's a loan you're going to put on a shelf. And if you put it on the shelf, you should do some type of due diligence on that loan every 3 to 6 months.
And so some of that due diligence would be what now? To check on taxes? Is that what you're saying?
To check taxes, to send them out a letter requesting proof of homeowner's insurance if the loan's not escrowed. Just some type of interaction, and maybe that person is not responsive the first 6 months that you have the loan, but maybe they pick up the phone and say, they call you and tell you, well, I filed bankruptcy. Why are you sending me this? And it's a way for you to open and engage with that borrower. Well, I'm not really pursuing the debt. I'm just making sure that my collateral is okay.
So you're allowed to protect the property, but not actually chase the borrower.
Correct. And you document those conversations and those phone calls and what type letters that you send to your borrowers. Any letter that you send to the borrower, make sure you have a bankruptcy clause on it, stating that you're not pursuing them personally in reference to that letter. Whatever correspondence that you send, you make sure that you have some form of verbiage on your letter in reference to bankruptcy if they filed, and that protects you.
Got it. So you keep every copy in case you end up in front of a judge. Is that what the reason is, or for documentation?
Yes, that is.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So does it matter between Chapter 7, Chapter 13? Let's just kind of poke around at that a little bit?
Well, if the Chapter 13, if it's closed, you still need to, you still need to protect yourself. You still need to document. If it's an open 13, you really shouldn't be doing too much reaching out to the borrower. You need to make sure that you either have filed your proof of claim, filed for, make sure that if you've purchased it, you've transferred the claim if it was already open at the time of purchase. So Chapter 13 is a little bit different than a Chapter 7.
Okay. I don't know much about bankruptcy, so I'm going to let you go with that, Sabrina. You can, if you want to differentiate a little bit for people, to say that a 13 is more of a debt reconstruction and a 7 is, what are the differences maybe?
Well, a Chapter 7 actually gives a homeowner a clean slate, so they think, where you can't pursue them at all, and they can walk away, and you can't pursue them for a deficiency balance or anything, where in a Chapter 13, there's a restructure, and there's a plan that's put into place, a payment plan that extended over a period of 5 years to address the current mortgage payment and the delinquent amount of the loan. And depending on if you're in first and second position, sometimes there can be a cram down if this is a primary residence of a homeowner. And even though bankruptcy is federal and the laws are supposed to be the same across the board in all of the states, sometimes you will find trustees handle bankruptcy differently in different states. And I don't know why, I can't answer that question, but the trustees are not all the same, and they do not handle bankruptcies, meaning a Chapter 13, always the same across the board, across all the states. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just pointing that out to you. If you're comparing apples to apples, if you had a foreclosure, not a foreclosure, but if you had a Chapter 13 in Ohio, and then you had a Chapter 13 in Pennsylvania, and wondering why the trustee is doing something different in Pennsylvania than they're doing in Ohio, you will find there's some differences in how they handle those.
Interesting. Very interesting. So now, maybe you can give us a little direction on the kind of a similar situation, except now you're in second position. You own the second position note. Are things exactly the same, or do things change? The game changes.
Well, it changes if there's equity or if there's no equity.
Okay. So let's get into that for a second. When you say equity now, let's use an example. We have a house that is worth $150,000, and there's a $140,000 first mortgage. So would you consider that equity above the first mortgage? Is that what you're talking about with equity?
Yes. It's not a lot, but it's something.
It's something that's protecting part of your second mortgage, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Even then, in a Chapter 7, before you reach out to the homeowner, you need to get permission from that bankruptcy attorney to have permission to contact the borrower. Don't just go guns blazing to contact that borrower, because it can cost you in the end. But once you get that green light from the attorney to be able to contact the borrower, just because you get the green light from the attorney does not mean that you're going to get a cooperative borrower. So you have to be careful of your approach with the borrower, especially when you don't really know what the situation is with the first. Nothing's reporting on the credit report. No, you can't find anything online in the county that there's an active foreclosure, but you don't know if they're a payment behind, if they're current, if the first decided to modify their loan. So you need to walk in trying to at least be the borrower's friend and not, I want my money. Sometimes
Perfect.
it gets you a lot further ahead if you take the approach that I'm just trying to check on you. I'm trying to see what's going on with your first. Are you current? Have you requested a modification? And they said, well, how can I request a modification? And I filed a chapter 7. Well, you can. We live in the United States of America. And because even the first lenders have taken such baths, sometimes even after Chapter 7, they will still offer a modification on the first with the mindset, I'm going to get them to execute new documents.
Hmm.
The consumer's not thinking that, but the financial institution's thinking that.
Yeah,
So,
I never explored that area either. Interesting.
so you communicate and you interview them. Well, what if you talk to them and they're 3 payments down, but the first hasn't started foreclosure, but you think that they might be on the line to maybe start foreclosure because they haven't been able to cure their delinquency even after they filed their Chapter 7. A couple of things can happen. They can convert their 7 to a 13. And it's like, how? Because it's still a secured debt, and they can do that within the time, not long after they've been discharged from their 7, but they still want to keep their house. You find out why they filed their Chapter 7. Was it their house, or was it all the other bills? Was it medical? Was it credit card debt? You have to find out the core reason on why a borrower filed a Chapter 7.
Hmm.
And that'll tell you a lot about what their intentions are. If they're going to take advantage and live as long as they can live for free, or if they're going to try to make this wrong right.
Yeah,
And
and I'm sure
go ahead.
most of the cases they will try to make the wrong right, and a lot of people have been coaxed into going into bankruptcy, in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. I don't know if you've
Correct.
seen that as well.
Correct. And so then I get on the phone and I start, digging in. Well, did you have a life-changing event? Did someone get sick? Did someone lose a job? Um, why are you past due on your mortgage? Let's look into some community agencies that may have some monies available to help you reinstate your first, or to help, even reinstate the second. But you have to get them on board, and you have to get them involved, and you have to engage with the homeowner in order to find this information out.
Sure.
And sometimes it takes a lot of time. This isn't just an overnight process. Sometimes this can take 3 to 6 months in engaging with them, but never get frustrated. Or if you are frustrated, you don't let the homeowner know you're frustrated. Let them feel that you are now the olive branch, and you're going to help them get back on track. With their first, you still have your second, and you can tell them that you might modify that. You may do a principal reduction just to get them back on board to start making payments on the second mortgage. And again, if you get them back on board with making payments, you can either keep it for a monthly income, or you can turn around and you can sell that loan to another note investor and add value to it because it's now a performing loan.
I love it. Yeah. That's great. Well, that's good. Now, would you recommend to investors, because we have a lot of investors on this call and people that are going to be reviewing this recording later on, that are investors that have shied away from purchasing notes that are currently in bankruptcy, just for the simple fact that they don't have the education. And I'm sitting here with my hand up in the air because I'm one of those persons. I'm one of those investors, and I'm waving my hand right now. Please enlighten us, if you would, on what how you would recommend to another investor or for yourself on purchasing notes that have been in previously in bankruptcy or are in active bankruptcy as at the time of purchase.
Well, I would say some of those loans are more valuable than some of the loans that you put more value on during your purchase. I say that bankruptcy loans that are in bankruptcy are the diamonds in the rough.
It goes totally against my theories. So please elaborate, because I think a few people just
when
sat
you
up
can knock on
forward
a
too.
door, when you get permission from a bankruptcy attorney to make contact with a homeowner, and maybe they decide they want to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and you can get them on board to move out. You give them a little bit of money. The house needs minimal repairs. You put it on the market and you sell it, and you make your money back very quickly. You have to think of people that file bankruptcy are looking for a way out. So if they're looking for a way out, you can be their way out, and you can rescue them. You can rescue them, and you can give them a clean slate, a clean start. But when you're doing that, you have to think about all the avenues that you need to address when you're doing that. If you get a loan that's in bankruptcy and you get a borrower who's willing to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, whether you're the first lender or the second lender, if there's equity in the house and there's value in the house, you still have to do some explaining to the borrower depending on your position. And what I mean by that is that if you're in first and they're the second and they're non-cooperative and they won't take a short and there's not a lot of wiggle room and they won't move, they won't budge because they think that there's some more money to be made, you have to explain to the homeowner, even though I'm taking this deed in lieu of foreclosure, I may still have to go all the way through with the foreclosure action. And the reason I'm going to have to do that is I'm going to have to eliminate the junior. Oh. But while you're doing that, you could be repairing the property, you've gotten them out, you're getting the property, you can be getting the property ready for show and actually let people that's going to go to sale to bid on this property, you can let them through. And I don't mean put a lot of money in it, but just clean it up, make it presentable if you're going to lead investors into a property that you now own contingent upon the second.
Got it.
And you also, one of the things that you also do is that when you're doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure, always, always, always get a limited power of attorney for a real estate transaction, because you never know what may come up. And just because the borrower is willing to sign today does not mean that they're going to sign off on something tomorrow. While you have them on board, make sure you get everything that you need from them.
Okay,
so you don't have to go back to that borrower for anything.
Okay, so the borrower's on board today, and they're all happy, and they think that Sabrina is the nicest thing to come along. There are certain things that you want to have locked away, and you're saying that that's a limited power of attorney?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, I always thought that a borrower's authorization was enough, but I guess the limited power of attorney goes even further.
Yes, it does.
So can you walk us through the little bit of differences between those two documents?
It gives you the ability to negotiate on their behalf in reference to that piece of property in that real estate transaction. A borrower's authorization is giving you permission to get information, and it's not giving you the authority to make a decision for that borrower.
Right.
That's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference. I've never pushed for that. I always thought that there's no way in the world anyone would ever sign that document.
I always get it signed. You don't sign it, you don't get your money.
Well, that's why I'm hiring you, Sabrina. Because I just thought I would never sign one. I would just think that no one else would ever either.
And your argument to the borrower is, it's a limited power of attorney. You're walking away from your house. I'm putting cash in your hand. I'm giving you a fresh start. Well, why aren't you going to sign it? I even got to the point of, well, don't. You stay in the situation you're in, and I'll just continue with my foreclosure action because I haven't stopped it. It's not on pause. It's still on go until everything is done that we need to have done. I'm still moving with my primary exit, and that's the foreclosure.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, that's the conversations. That's a tough conversation to have, and I'm glad you're well versed in doing it.
And the other thing is, sometimes you will find that bankruptcy attorneys also want to make a quick buck in this. So they want to facilitate the execution of all the documents. They want to review the documents. They want to advise their client that has no money to pay them. So you may get a bankruptcy attorney. No offense to you people that live in New Jersey and New York, because that's where I find it the most, that you may find a bankruptcy attorney who represented someone in a Chapter 7 say, well, I need to be paid for my time to engage with my client in reference to what you want them to do. Not a problem. Here's my budget of $5,000, Mr. Bankruptcy Attorney. If you get your client to take $1,000, you want $4,000, have at it. But $5,000 is my limit. That's all I'm giving away, and you figure out how that's going to be dispersed. And if you can sleep at night with whatever decision that you make with your client to get them to execute my documents, you have a good day.
Got it. Well, it's very enlightening so far. Now, as far as doing some preliminary research before you buy a note that you know or you have a good idea that is in bankruptcy, where can you actually find that information?
You broke up. I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't hear the question.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering, on notes, do you recommend or do you automatically go right onto Pacer to check the documentation that's in Pacer? Do you find that as useful information? Can you give us a little bit of idea on that?
Well, there's a couple things that I will do when I find out the borrower has filed bankruptcy, and maybe even what I want to pay for a loan. I look at the docket in Pacer, and sometimes that will tell you something. But if you go back and if you have a copy of their credit report prior to them filing bankruptcy, sometimes the credit report will tell a story. You will have a borrower who has straight ones all across their credit report, and then all of a sudden they hit a 2, they hit a 3, they hit a 9. Why did that happen? They just fell off. Something happened. It's painting a picture for me, telling me a story about that borrower by looking at their credit report. Now, if it's all over the place, you know, it went to a 3, went back to a 2, went to a 1, went back to a 3, it doesn't tell me much, other than sometimes I think those people play games. But if it's just they just fell off the cuff, something happened. So I start looking at age on the credit report. I start looking at what type of industry they worked in. You will also find that falling off the cuff on a lot of people who worked in the mortgage industry during the mortgage boom, because a lot of them did a bunch of things that they shouldn't have done either. But it tells you maybe what type of person you might be dealing with. It can tell you personality. It can tell you if they're going to be arrogant. It can tell you if they're going to be humble and they want your help. And I know that's some of you guys are probably saying, she's nuts. No, I'm not. I've done this for a long time. And the credit report and the docket can sometimes paint a picture for me. And 9 times out of 10, if I look at it the way I'm telling you that I look at it, I'm not wrong.
Great. It's
just been my approach on how I approach that individual to see how I can get them on board with me.
Interesting. And that you just touched on something that is very interesting. And it didn't even cross my mind. Would you be interested in helping investors do some due diligence prior to a note purchase?
It depends on what it is, and depends on how much time that it would take. Generally, when I was working for an investor and we did note purchases, we split it up into 3 different sections.
Okay.
And one of the things that I did was I actually looked at the picture, is what I would call it, and I would do an analysis on the borrower and just kind of paint a picture. And it didn't take me very long, but like tax checks, I had one person focus on tax checks. And sometimes I would even farm that out to India because it was cheaper, and as long as they had good instructions, they were able to do that. I had one person pull value. It wasn't just me doing it all. I created a team that specialized in certain areas of the note purchase.
Well, that's what I mean.
And then
Okay. Yeah. I mean, talk about the whole assistance. in reviewing
Okay.
and making sure that people aren't dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on a pile of
On that
garbage.
note.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we would use a lot of public databases to get our information. Um, I don't always recommend that you utilize realtors. Sometimes, if you know that realtor and you've established a relationship with that realtor to help you pound down a value is one thing, but just sending realtors out knocking on doors, that they shouldn't be knocking on doors to get a value for you, I don't recommend. But yes, I could offer a lot of service to help people come up with dollars that they would put on
Yeah.
what they're going to purchase a note for.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this whole business, Sabrina, and I'm pretty much talking to everyone on the call here. I look at this business as it can be a very expensive learning process for people. Whether,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about just the purchase of one note. Let's say the note is $100,000 first mortgage, and you're going to spend $45,000. Well, $45,000 is a pretty significant expense on just an investment. It's not your primary residence that you're living in. This is strictly an investment. And to be able to save someone potentially a mistake of buying a $45,000 mistake. Now
Mm-hmm.
the stakes have gone up significantly. And it's not like you're going to go out and buy 10 shares of Microsoft and you're spending $230. It's the stakes are high in this business and the rewards are
Yes.
high, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
we know that you can turn that $40,000 into a $60,000 win or a $70,000 win over the course of the next 15 years. So to have someone on your team, such as yourself, to go in and do some due diligence and help someone out and say, you know what, I wouldn't go near that thing. That is worth
Mm-hmm.
thousands of dollars. And people need to understand that if they want to play in this game, it is a high stakes game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a game where the odds can be skewed in your favor by having the correct knowledge. And it just goes such a long way. And I see people trying to be cheap and save money and do things themselves or hire the wrong person to do something that is a pretty high skilled position to be in. And I consider your due diligence and your expertise and your experience as a high level commodity that it's just not available. 99% of the world don't even know what we're talking about when we
Mm-hmm.
start talking about this business. And to find someone that has the level of experience that you have in this, I just want people to understand that we're very fortunate to have you on the call tonight and to have you actually be willing to want to work with my people. And that's just really impressive, and I appreciate that. That's what all
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say. So the next thing I was kind of wondering, well, do you feel that you want to go on and talk a little bit more about Chapter 7, verses 13, or did you want to go ahead and field a couple of questions?
I'll field a couple of questions, but I wanted to also address one other thing with with a bankruptcy, especially a Chapter 7. When you're doing your due diligence and you're in first position.
Before you buy the note
On
or after you buy the note?
Well, if you have the loan docs, this is another diamond in the rough that people sometimes miss. Sometimes you will find an assignment of rent clause in um, loan documentation,
Okay.
and people say there's no way that there's been a receivership put in place, and a receivership is actually someone appointed by the courts that actually is still receiving rents while someone has checked out on their property. It's normally a property management group. They're maintaining the lawn. They're maintaining the maintenance. They actually get a fee at the end of this, but this is a true and factual story that I found some loans that had been purchased, that we had purchased, that had assignment of rent clause in them. One of the assignment of rent clauses allowed us to collect after we took a deed in lieu of foreclosure. over $80,000 in rent that was collected that the borrower had no idea was sitting in a bank account.
Wow.
And there was nothing that the borrower could do because he filed a Chapter 7 and he just thrown up his hand, and I got him to sign a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and I got him to give me a limited power of attorney. So I was completely in control.
Very interesting.
So those are the little things that I say that are diamonds in the rough. When you're looking over loan documents and when you're doing your due diligence, when you see that assignment of rents clause.
Yeah, that's a huge win.
And that's
a huge number.
And there were, in each one of only one of the funds I think didn't have much money in them because it was one that was hard to stay rented. But you would be amazed at those diamonds in the rough when you start looking at areas that you don't want to buy notes in, and you find a way to be creative on what would make you buy notes and mortgages in a certain area, like New Jersey. New Jersey was big for investors to buy properties, and a lot of those lenders were smart, and they put those assignment of rent clauses because they knew they were not primary residents. So note buyers, think outside the box when you're looking at things. Don't just look at value. Don't just look at an area you want to focus in. Sometimes thinking outside the box can actually be the place where you make your money, where you make your highest return on a place that you felt was untouchable for you.
Yeah, that's great information. And I guess you had to alert some of your investors that are working with you to some of these realizations, because they just didn't have the knowledge that information was or those rents were actually able to be taken over. Is that correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's huge. 80 grand. That's amazing. That was a good one.
And just so you all know, this isn't old stuff. This is stuff that I've been involved in within the last 8 to 12 months. This isn't old stuff that I'm bringing up. This is recent stuff. I've done asset management up until today. I mean, I do asset management on a regular basis for a few investors. So the information that you're getting is up close and personal, and it's live. It's not old.
Great. Now, what is, you mentioned dual tracking. What is that exactly?
You broke up again. I'm sorry, Mike.
Dual tracking? I see someone has a question about dual tracking. DUAL? I don't know why.
Dual tracking.
Yeah, I'm just reading through some of the questions that one investor had. He said, according to Dodd-Frank, I thought that you could not do dual tracking. I have no idea what that means.
Give me 1 second.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So let me just let's see, read off a couple of questions here. Oh, I see. That would be foreclosure at the same time that you work on a loan modification.
Well, I didn't say loan modification. I said foreclosure and the deed in lieu of foreclosure.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So
I
yes.
can do that.
You can.
If I'm working on a modification, absolutely, that foreclosure file is put on hold. That is true.
Okay, explain that one more time. I'm sorry.
If I'm working on a deed in lieu of foreclosure, that does not make me stop my foreclosure action. It does not, because they can change their mind at any given time. That foreclosure action is not dismissed until I have all executed documents in my hand, and that's when I close my file with my attorney.
Okay, so.
But if I'm working on a loan mod, that file is put on hold. Yes, it is.
I see. Okay, great. Now, do you? I think this is an easy question, but obviously, do you recommend using an attorney for deed in lieu of foreclosure?
Yes, I do. as far as preparing the documents.
Yes.
Preparing the documents, and I will shop priced for those documents. I don't always utilize the attorney's office that's doing my foreclosure, but most of the time I do. But if they come with some ridiculous cost to prepare some documents for me, I will always go to a plan B. And if it's a place where I've done the a deed in lieu of foreclosure before, more than likely I will do the documents myself, and I have a friend that's an attorney, and I have her look them over.
And look them over. Perfect. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Okay, let's see, another question. Maybe you could just drill down a little bit on what a reaffirmation is, reaffirming the debt?
Reaffirming the debt is basically that. They reaffirm their debt even though they've gone through a Chapter 7. And this is more along the lines on a borrower who, it's not about the house that they're filing their bankruptcy. It's about medical bills. It's about unsecured credit cards that's eating them alive, and it's causing them to have a challenge to make their monthly mortgage payment, or it's taking up all of their extra cash to pay those credit card bills, so they will reaffirm the debt. That used to really be big on borrowers reaffirming their debt in the Chapter 7, but you get it now, but you don't get it a lot.
I see.
But what you will get in a Chapter 7 is that you will have a homeowner that is current at the time that they file their bankruptcy. They will continue to pay their mortgage, and that's what the bankruptcy attorneys is telling them to do. If you're current and you're following and you're abiding by the agreement that you entered into, and this isn't really why you're filing bankruptcy, so what, who cares? Most of the time, the mortgage lenders are not returning those payments. They're applying the payments because they don't want the hassle. But here's a bump in the road. What happens to this borrower who's been discharged out of bankruptcy for 3 years, and all of a sudden they become delinquent? What do? You follow the same steps that I provided to you at the beginning of the call. You don't take it upon yourself to send that borrower any communication without the bankruptcy disclosure on it, and you reach out to their bankruptcy attorney and find out if you can contact them directly and let him know that they have actually fallen behind on their mortgage.
Even though the bankruptcy attorney has not been in the picture for 3 years?
Even though he's not been in the picture for 3 years. You still, to cover your own behind, the first phone call is that you find that attorney. Well, what if I can't find him? Well, then you tread very lightly on what you do. Sometimes you need to start the foreclosure to get the borrower to reach out to you. And if they reach out to you, it's a different ball game, and you can communicate with them, but be very careful on the words that you utilize with them in reference to collecting what's past due on their account, because there's still no reaffirmation on the loan, and technically they're still protected under the bankruptcy law.
Gotcha. Okay, this is great information. Have you ever come across a borrower, I know I have, that thought that their bankruptcy had wiped out their mortgage? What are you giggling about?
Those are the best kind.
Those are the best kind.
Because most of the time, they're being smart when they call you, and they have all this attitude in their voice until you bring them to reality. And they're like, well, my attorney didn't tell me that. Well, you need to pick up the phone and call your attorney back and get educated about what you paid him for. But then once you educate them, and then also, like you point out that this loan hasn't been paid on in 1,065 days, but you're willing, if they're willing to participate, you could just take a payment and they can just start making their payments from that day forward.
Sure.
We won't even address their arrearages. You become their best friend. They don't want to call their lawyer. They want to know, where do I send the payment? Their attitude changes severely after you educate them, especially if they're current on their first.
Awesome. Yeah, I've actually conference called their bankruptcy attorney with the borrower and myself, or whoever was handling my notes for me, and let their own bankruptcy attorney educate them. That was an interesting one too. So absolutely, notes that are in bankruptcy are not untouchable, folks. You need to get someone on your team that knows more about it than you do, and there are people out there. Sabrina is one of them, obviously, and you can use her skills and her experience to profit in this business. And we've covered a ton of stuff here in the hour or so that we've been on, Sabrina. What's the best way that people can get in touch with you so that they can take advantage of your skills?
Well, I have a new slogan. It's called "Let's Talk About It." And let's talk about it is that if you have one loan, if you have 10 loans, if you have 1,000 loans, we can talk about it. I can do one-on-one consulting. If you have a team, I'm willing to coach and mentor your team, and we can talk about what my consulting fee is. You can email me at sabrina.allen@yahoo.com, or you can reach me by phone.
And that's
Mike, is it
Sabrina,
okay?
Sabrina with a P, Saprina.Allen at, what was it?
Yeah, yahoo.com.
Yahoo.com. Sabrina,
Mm-hmm.
Saprina.Allen, Allen, at yahoo.com. Perfect. And what else do I see for great questions here? I think that's about it. I know that you really flew through this thing tonight, and this hopefully will be available in a recording format in the next few days. If I don't make that available, please email me at mike@noteconference.com. And make sure you get a copy of this. You can go through it slowly to kind of figure out what in the heck Sabrina was just talking about, because my head is spinning. And it's an awesome part of this business. Obviously, Sabrina is not only well versed in the bankruptcy issues, but as far as the due diligence, understanding what notes are good, credit reports is a major part of this business. Being able to evaluate the borrower before you purchase the note is a very powerful tool that we use, and Sabrina is a master at that as well. And Sabrina, any closing thoughts that you'd like to get out to I think we've got about 100 people on this call tonight.
One of the things that I feel that has made us all successful who have been successful in the note business and working loans, we feed off of each other. Don't be selfish with your knowledge. And yes, everybody has a price that you have to pay for something, but if you can help someone along, don't be selfish with your knowledge. Be willing to extend your hand to help someone to walk along the way, and that will get you so much further and so much respect in this business.
Nice.
And that's really all that I really have to say. And if you need me, if you have a question, you can shoot me an email. I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. I am a little busy, but I will try to get back to you at my earliest convenience. And I really would like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to me. And I'm sorry if I moved a little fast. It was a crash course one-on-one. But if you want more information and more knowledge and you have particular files you'd like me to look at, look me up.
Cool. Okay, folks. Well, Sabrina, again, thank you. And this will go down in history as one of NoteConference's best conference call. And I really appreciate you being on tonight. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time out on their Tuesday night to hang out with us. NoteConference does offer some educational program where we do give phone support on the note business itself, and we have the resources like Sabrina to fall back on. And so feel free to send us emails, get in touch with us. If you have questions regarding the note business in general, I'll try to get those questions answered as quickly as possible. And thanks for being part of NoteConference. It's been an enjoyable ride. Like Sabrina says, this is definitely a team sport. It's not like going out and buying yourself a rental and collecting the rents and now you're all on your own. This is a collaborative effort. We've purchased notes together as a collaboration. We've shared ideas as a collaboration. We've partnered and built businesses as collaborations just from this group itself. So thanks again. And Sabrina, have a great night, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Thanks, folks.